Hey guys, Steve Harper with the Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, as you know. I am super excited for you to join us for this episode because, man, oh man, I wish I had known about this guest's work years ago. Would have saved me so much struggle and frustration trying to help and work through as an entrepreneur how to get on the same page as my partner, my wife. We went through some trials and tribulations, as a lot of couples do, and fortunately, because she's amazing, was probably carrying the biggest amount of the emotional baggage and weight for our relationship. And even though I was going through a lot of stress and struggle as an entrepreneur, she never gave up on me. And today's guest, Gabriela Embon, is the author of Becoming a Power Couple, and she is a coach. She is a keynote speaker. She is a lightning rod for understanding the dynamics between managing your career and your professional aspirations and how that must tie directly to the relationship you have with your romantic partner or your spouse. And I just had an amazing conversation with her. I enjoyed it so much. There were so many different ways that we could take this conversation and talk about this challenging dynamic. And I felt like at the end that there was just so much more that we could explore. We're going to have to in a future conversation. Gabriela is really, really awesome at explaining why this is a hand in glove situation. In fact, we talked a little bit about this. I don't see a lot of coaches actually explore both sides of the coin, both your personal and your professional life, but specifically around the dynamic of that relationship. And I personally have experienced it through friends and also former clients that have gone through the difficulties of starting or growing a business or, climbing the corporate ladder, and that being their primary focus and that becoming their more important component to invest their time and energy, and how it ultimately leads to a lot of resentment and mistrust and lack of momentum in relationships. And sadly, I've watched too many couples break up because they didn't understand one another. They didn't understand the pressures, the challenges, the issues that they were going through. And had they had someone like Gabriela in their corner, I think things would have been vastly different. And I love the fact that as a coach, she is focusing on both sides of the coin and helping people understand that it's a package deal. And she talks about a word that I love so much, in that there is a commitment that you go through and you have to do certain things, even though you may not necessarily want to. They just have to be done. And she uses the analogy of when you have a baby at home, you don't have a choice when you have to get up at 2 o'clock and do a feeding. It's just what you do. It's what you signed up for. Well, believe it or not, if we approach our relationships in a similar capacity, it's amazing how our entire perspective of how that impacts our professional success and our career aspirations, it's mind blowing in terms of her approach and how she takes it. I think there's going to be a ton that you'll be benefiting from in terms of her great advice, her good stories, her strategies, and her model. I would have a pin at the ready for all the nuggets and morsels of awesomeness that she dishes out. You will be grateful to capture those and think about them and explore them. And then more importantly, take the time to reach out to her if you feel like she can bring some value to what your journey is. I couldn't recommend her more. She is just a dynamic individual, and I have talked way too much. So with no further ado, let's dive into this conversation with Gabriela Embon. Guys, I am super excited to be joined by Gabriela Embon this morning with the Ripple Effect podcast. Gabriela, how are you doing?
Fantastic and excited to be here, Steve.
I'm excited too. I've been looking forward to this interview because, as I said before we started recording, I feel like we speak the same love language. I love how you put your attention on relationships and connection, how you look at that through the lens of your professional life, but also what you bring home and obviously into your personal life. And so I don't normally spend a lot of time diving right into this conversation, because I want to get to know you, but I know you have a very limited schedule today. I want to be respectful of your time, and I just want to start by I want to know more about this book, Becoming a Power Couple, and your take on it because it looks. I have not gotten an opportunity to read it, but I am anxiously awaiting a copy, and I can't wait to learn more about it. What Tell us about the book and what inspired you to write it, and then we'll dive into the other elements of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with what inspired me to write it. I've been a coach for the past 15 years, and I have coached couples, but I've also coached individuals and specifically leaders and professionals. And what I noticed is that when the conversation, we were talking about career, right? Work.
Uh-huh.
And when the conversation shifted to family life, home life, marriage, relationship, I could see a shift in them that I couldn't ignore. Their voice would soften, and I could even hear a whisper of regret
Yeah.
or shame. And I realized that as certain as they felt at work, as uncertain as they felt at home. And of course, that broke my heart because
Sure.
it shouldn't be that way, right? We can thrive in both. One doesn't come at the expense of each other. In fact, I believe that our relationship is supposed to fuel our career, our purpose. That led me to the desire to share the messages that I was sharing with other couples. But not everybody was contacting me for couples coaching. So I said, what if I can share these messages of how to do marriage and how to engineer? What I saw primarily is that people expected
Yep.
love to be a strategy, that the moment they said yes, that should take you, you know, through the entire journey with life, you and your partner. And I kept realizing that people don't know that love is not a strategy. They don't know how to engineer and how to build that lasting relationship because, to be honest, not everybody had the best model at home, right?
Yeah.
And
I
that there are
definitely did not.
well,
Yeah.
and that there are best practices and there are do's and don'ts and how to fully embody the identity of a committed relationship. Because when a man, a woman, doesn't matter, man, woman, woman, when people are single and you are a man and a woman, the moment you enter a committed relationship, and let's call it marriage to make this easier, you shift your identity to being husband and wife.
Hmm.
It's today I was talking with Bhaskar Gonswami. We're preparing a couples retreat, and he said such a beautiful line. He said, "It's like saying the father is born when the child is born." Well, husband and wife are born when the commitment, when you make that commitment, whether it's the wedding day, the vows, whatever, in any way you commit. But I find that many times we are resisting that new identity and we try our best to keep the old identity.
Yep.
So, what's the purpose of it? In fact, the new identity of husband and wife and how to build a life together, it's the whole purpose. You are not losing yourself, you are building something new and stronger. And that's what the book is all about, how to build that synergy, how to build that power couple synergy and engineer with commitment and with the best practices a marriage that thrives alongside your career. And it offers a beautiful framework of 4 pillars.
I love that. There's so many questions that are bubbling around my head right now because I think your work is absolutely essential and important. What I find, and I'm quite honestly very impressed with you, is the fact that you are taking on both of these very heavy topics and trying to recognize that independent of one another. I mean, there's a lifetime of work for a lot of people, right? In whether it's their career and their professional ambitions and the coaching that goes around, maximizing that value for them. And then the how to exist with another human being, right? In this romantic relationship. And I have not yet met a coach which tackles both and looks at it as sort of a hand in glove situation. Although it's very obvious it is, right? It's a circumstance that one definitely impacts the other, and if you don't do it right, or you don't have a plan or some strategy, or like you said, engineering a an approach to it, then left to your own devices, that's where a lot of things really start to fall apart. Professional career paths, are affected. Obviously, personal relationships and the stress you bring home from work and all of those challenges create a whole different dynamic and layer. And if you're not communicating with your partner all the stress and problems that you're dealing with at work, and all the insecurities and scared feelings that you might have about the future, that's going to manifest in ways that might be untenable on your personal life. And how did you come up with that? I just love the fact that you're approaching
So
both of it and saying, hey, look, we have to address both because it's so essential.
I'm so happy you're asking me that question because nobody ever did actually.
That's good. Nobody ever gives me credit for actually being smart to ask a question
So
nobody else asks. So
this
I
is what
appreciate
makes the interview great is your questions, right? So
it.
first of all, I strongly believe that okay, so I believe we should create a life of no regrets. That's our purpose, right?
Love it.
To build a life that it's the best that we can do. We didn't compromise. But when we talk about the word compromise, is compromise on what? In my belief, a life of no regret is a life in which you don't compromise on the two most important aspects of an adult life. One is your purpose, the way you're here to serve. Ideally, that would be your career too, right? Aligning with your purpose, aligning your career, the way you provide for yourself with your purpose. That's number one. And number two, or maybe that should be number one, is your primary relationship, right? Simply because, why these two? Because these are the two aspects of our lives in which you actually serve. You are here to serve and to build.
Yeah,
So in your relationship, you build also, if you have children, you build a family, and you also have a lot of choice. You can course correct. Your parents, you can course correct. You're born into your family. It's a choice at the soul level if you want to look at it, but not consciously. Your
sure.
children, you get what you get. You can return them, right? So your relationship and your career are the two areas that give you the most amount of growth because there's the most amount of potential for you to make it in great. So this is where you're going to be triggered the most and where you can work on yourself the most and grow the most. So that's I believe in the integration of these two. If I'm a physiotherapist, I wouldn't tell a client, I work on your legs, your hands are not my responsibility. Well, that doesn't really work, right? We are
Yep.
one body and we have to integrate all parts of it. So the common work-life balance looks at career and relationship as two different forces that normally compete, and you need to juggle, you need to balance them. I believe this model is not feasible for people with high demanding careers, stressful careers, or high ambition. Really, if you want to create a lot, that's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
The alternative, a much more holistic approach, would be to integrate the two and to view your career and your relationship not as two competing forces, but two parts of one mission that fuel each other, right? So that's why I focus on both and the intersection between both. Does it make
This is
sense?
Yes, it makes total sense. This is why I was so fascinated to have this conversation, because I think that a lot of people look at these things as isolated situations and they don't cross over, and there's no reason to think that, right? But I know, even with my own coaching clients, when I find somebody who's going through a rough period, or they have a level of dissatisfaction with where their career path is taken, or they're just not, happy in the world that they're in, oftentimes much of what is occurring, I call it, in their 8 to 5 lifetime, right? The 8 to 5 space of the day, that frustration, that challenge, those issues, they don't just automatically clock out when you do, right? They follow you home, and oftentimes if you're not communicating, or you don't have that level of communication with your partner, so that you don't just come home and unload and bitch and complain all day about what happened that particular, or all night about what happened all day, but that there's some mutual understanding of the challenges that you're facing, or the dissatisfaction or frustration, and you're coming into an environment where someone's there to support you and love you through it, and they recognize when you've had a good day or a bad day, and they can almost sort of intuitively pick that up the moment you walk in the door, how vastly different those home lives and those personal lives are than people that keep it isolated, bundled up, but it almost always bubbles up over in ways that you can't expect. You're either aggressive, you're disrespectful, you're shut down, you're quiet, or you're argumentative all the time, because that's what you're accustomed to on your professional side. And then you have a spouse or a significant other who's receiving that in your personal life, and they're kind of like, where the heck did this come from? This is not the person I agreed to be with. This is not the environment I signed up for. And you see how many marriages or otherwise promising romantic relationships are headed for the edge of the cliff, and they don't even know it, and don't recognize that there is a controllable element of that. And part of that is letting that other person in to understand what's going on, but communicating in a way that isn't just constantly downloading and complaining. It has to be a conversation, and you have to pull that person in, even though they're not at your job day to day. They can be as critical to your daily success as just about anything, because they lay the foundation for what sends you back to work tomorrow.
Absolutely. And you said it so well, Steve. Look, one thing that is important to realize is that commitment in the relationship or showing up is not fueled by love or feelings. So I don't doubt that if you had a difficult day at work, when you come home, your feelings are leave me alone, right? Um, but commitment is not fueled by feelings. Commitment is fueled by intentions that are followed by rituals, action,
Yeah.
right? So the mind, right, has to be first, mind over heart, right? Now we understand that when it comes to parenthood, because when you have a baby, you don't feel like waking up every 2 hours, but you do it because it's mind over heart,
Got
right?
to
You
do
do
it.
what you have
Yep.
to do because you are committed.
Yep.
So somehow in relationships we lose track with that concept, and then we say, well, I don't feel like being a husband or a wife or a parent today, and I will disconnect. Now if I'm committed and I practice the rituals of integration, communication, collaboration, I can come home and say to my spouse, I had a really difficult day. Do you mind if I'm going to take an hour for myself? Or you may even say, and that happens sometimes with our children, that they say, can I just eat on my own today? Because we have supper as a family. But sometimes they had a day at home. Can I just eat in my room? I need really to decompress. And of course you can, because
Sure.
you ask, we understand. But it requires understanding and communication and the practice of the rituals. Like you said, if I had a difficult day at work, and then I come home, and at the end of the day, I will do a debrief with my spouse. We will sit over a cup of tea once I'm rested a little bit, a glass of wine, and you share with each other, your day.
Yeah.
And when you're sharing your day and you're sharing your emotions, first of all, you feel held, supported, understood. So if I had a complaint to you about, I don't know, the way you left the laundry today, but now you're sharing with me your day, I'm just not going to mention that.
Yeah.
But if I don't know what's going on with you, then I'm going to focus on myself.
Yeah.
So I want to be compassionate. I want to be your best friend too. I want to be understanding, and I want to be generous. But I cannot be generous if you don't let me in
Yep.
or understanding. So these are the rituals that I usually lecture in tech conferences. We have two types of rituals. We have operational rituals that help us run the home life as smooth as possible, like a well-oiled machine. And then we have connection rituals. And connection rituals are meant to keep the connection alive even when life is busy, difficult, very challenging. This is what makes you feel you are in this together and problems are solved together. I'll give you an example. About a month ago, we spent a week at the hospital because my husband had a spine issue that ended in
Oof,
spine surgery.
oof.
And what unlocked the process of finally, um, being put in the queue for surgery, we were in limbo, we were in standby for a few days, was that I asked him one question. I asked him in a moment, I said, "What do you truly want?" I didn't solve his back problems. I
Yep.
just asked him, "What do you truly want?" And him getting clear about what he truly wants and the intention, the next day things move forward. Just there was a breakthrough. The surgeon came, things started to move forward. So we might not have the solutions for our partners, but it is through that sacred union that sometimes we can provide exactly what the other one needs to
Yeah.
find a solution.
I love that. And I think one of the things that, I mean, there's so many great points that you made there, Gabriela, about the importance when I hear what you're talking about, marriage or coupling doesn't come with an owner's manual, right? There's not, maybe it does now with your book. And I'm going to be recommending it to lots of people. I can feel it. But the thing is that we're often left to our own devices to figure these things out. And you touched on this at the very beginning. Most of our reference points come from how we were raised or the family environment. And I know that one of the phrases that I heard often in my home was, "You just wouldn't understand. I'm not even going to get into it," right? Because my dad had a very stressful, challenging job, but just that statement, you're telling your partner, and I can see where it manifests in resentment. I always tell my audiences resentment is the super secret promise of revenge, right? Because at the end, if I have it, I'm going to get you back somehow. You may not see it, you may not know it, but it's coming and it's inevitable. And when you create situations like that by saying you're not smart enough to understand what I'm going through or what's happening, even though that may not have been the intention, that's what the person hears, right? And then I'm not even getting into it is actually closing off an entire part of that partner's life, which then makes it even more isolating and more challenging, which then the natural impact there, the negative ripple effect, to use my own terminology, is that they'll close off and be more secluded and more private or more not as forthcoming or as much shareable as or sharing as they could. And then you end up having two people that are operating in this environment that aren't even speaking a common language any longer. And then you wonder why couples start to drift apart. I know that the work you do has got to be so, so powerful and so important. I wish I had discovered it early on. When I first became an entrepreneur, I got married and started a business within basically 2 months of each other. And it was the worst decision I could have ever made. How my wife stayed with me for, we're going to celebrate, our 32nd year of marriage. Don't tell her. I'll be
Congratulations.
31. Not sure, but it's been a long time. But we had rough times because we couldn't communicate because we didn't know the rules of engagement. We didn't know how to treat one another with respect and dignity enough to let one another in on the stresses that were going on. And being entrepreneurs, that was just a recipe for disaster, right? Creates conflict, creates challenges. And what I love about what you're proposing through your work and your coaching and obviously the book is that you're giving a game plan. Like, hey, we know where things will end if you don't do something positive and you don't set some parameters, right? And treat one another with dignity and respect and let them in. We know where it'll end up because almost everybody ends up there and it's not a good destination. But imagine how differently things would be if you started today, even if you've been together forever and you could recast this in a way that says, and maybe it's my age. You're very young compared to me, but I've like age and wisdom has told me something about connecting is we're just not good at verbalizing what we really need in the moment. And so I have gotten very committed to being like, what I need right now, like you said, is I need that hour. I just need to decompress. I had a really stressful day. I don't want to take it out on you. So could you just give me the space? And then when I'm done, I'll come share a little bit if you still want to hear it, what occurred. But you set the table so that it's not a complaint session, it's a conversation opportunity. And you do it vastly different in a way that isn't isolating to your partner and doesn't create that level of resentment. And so I think that it's so important for people that are going to see this episode and to hear this is so essential for any kind of relationship, but especially the people that you choose as your life partner or your current romantic partner, is clear, honest communication, but setting the parameters about what that looks like, especially in those high tense, high stress moments.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way you phrase everything, and I want to reflect back on 2 points you talked about. You talked about resentment, which I love the way you said it's the promise of revenge or
Yeah,
something like
super secret promise of revenge.
that.
I
I
will
love
get
that.
you back. Yeah.
So what happens in the beginning of the relationship? A relationship usually goes through 3 stages. Obviously, the first stage is the falling in love, the honeymoon. What happens there is that we build a connection, right?
Yep.
And then when we move to the second phase, which is the phase when all that honeymoon fades away and we start triggering each other, we start building resentment.
Yep.
And the resentment, if we learn to live with it, unfortunately, what it does, it secretly erodes, like underwater, the bond of connection we have. And the more water stays, the more damage you have, and then we end up start growing apart, as you said. So
Yep.
very important in that phase to actually work through the 4 pillars. If I can have to say, the 4 pillars are the framework to make sure you're able to go through the second phase and grow out of it to become a power couple.
Yep.
So we always want to protect the connection. The connection comes before communication. When people are connected, they communicate differently, they solve problems together, they become each other's best friend and lovers. It's all about connection.
Yep.
And then you said that sometimes we have to ask, say, give me just an hour to decompress, and then I can share what's going on if you still want to hear.
Yep.
If you still want to hear was powerful because as part of the second pillar, which is the you pillar, we have 4: me, you, our, and us,
I love that.
is the concept of respect. So when I want to have a conversation, a deeper conversation with my spouse, especially if I see he's in the middle of something, but even if he's not, I will say, I want to talk to you about something. Is this a good time? I
Yeah.
actually do the same with we do the same with the kids too. They're
Yeah.
not so kids anymore, and I'm not as young as you think, but thank you for that. So, my oldest is 23. So,
Oh,
and
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't get married when I was 12. So just to clarify that.
Okay.
Uh, so we asked, is this a good time? Because, and we're also okay to say sometimes when we are talking and talking to say, okay, I got it. I really need to pause right now, right? So many times people come and just start, complaining or ranting, and maybe you're in the middle of something, or maybe you are not in the right mind space, right? So we have to be mindful of space and time
Yep.
when we want to have deeper conversations and truly connect through communication. Is to ask, it's not even permission. Is this the right time? We
Yeah.
want to call it permission. So you said it differently, but it's the same. If you still want to hear about it, because
Yes.
by the time you feel like talking, I might say, you know what? Now my head is all in, I don't know, supper time,
Something else.
bathing
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Let's just sit together with a cup of tea, with a glass of wine, a beer, whatever you need, after we put the kids to sleep. I really want to be there for you. And then we realize that sometimes people say, I don't have time to do marriage development.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, was that hard to sit with your spouse at the end of the day over a glass of wine and just share your day? That's not hard. So it's really a question of intention. You have time to do personal development, you do business development, career development, marriage development is
So
always
essential.
should be at the first. So
Yeah.
essential.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about as you go through life, which is, sadly, this is the reality that we live in these days. That
We have a lot of distraction.
a lot of distractions. People are way too willing to give up. They feel like there's too much heavy lifting and work to do it. And I have one particular friend in mind that went through a divorce, blamed it wholly on, didn't understand what he was doing, what he's building. He was an entrepreneur, and the company, the venture became the excuse, but he let that be not only the excuse but ultimately the reason why the relationship ended. She, for her part, was just trying to be a supportive spouse but had no way to plug in and know how to do it. And then you build up these walls of resentment. They spend less and less time together, and they spend more and more time with other people, and things happen, right? And the reality is, he said, now looking back, it's probably been 5 to 7 years. He could see that had he just said, yeah, I could use your help, I could use your input, or I could really use an ear now. I don't need necessarily the feedback or an opinion, but if he could have just been kinder in how he rolled that out. Because everything, when you think about it, and he and I talked about this in great detail, is that, you guys were married not only to each other, but to your finances and to the future of the enterprise of your marriage. And that ties directly to the venture that you are working on, because all of your financial security is tied to what you're building. And yes, the stress and the pressure and the issues that you're going through were certainly not insignificant, but at the same time, you make them even more challenging by dealing with them and isolating alone. And then all you do is tell your other partner that, even though it very much affects their life in every respect, you're not giving them the seat at the table to have that discussion or that opportunity to ask questions, or even just be there to let you unload on what's going on, and then ask, for, well, what do you think? What would you think I should say or do, or how would I approach this? And in the case of this individual, he has a lot of regrets. He's now seen, the love of his life now move on with somebody else, and he knows that it was a huge swing and a miss. And he ended up selling the company anyway. And the company, that he thought required all this time and energy and attention and was like his baby, now he's left with nothing, right? No company, no team, no spouse, no longer as strong a relationship with the kids that they had. And now he's resentful of being an entrepreneur and not even sure he wants to go down that path again, right? So you think of all the decision trees and all the potential ripples that happened if you just went a little bit one way and opened up your purview a little bit, or had a framework like what you are talking about in becoming a power couple, something to guide you and direct you, or have a coaching relationship with someone as brilliant as you, how much pain and anguish you could have avoided. And really, at the end of the day, all the stress and challenges you were going through, it's better to go through it together, where you've got a supportive partner that's, committed to
But that's
at
what you
least
sign
being
up
there.
for.
That's
When
exactly
you
right. For
you
better
know
or
what?
worse, right?
That's what you sign up for. That's the all or nothing. Really, in relationships, people are one foot in, one foot out. I'm
Yeah,
in, but I'm not fully in. That will never work in marriage,
that's right.
because it's the foundation to an entire life you're building. You have to be fully in. And the paradox is that, um, because I have so many problems at work or in my company, right? I don't have the time to let you in. Well, here's the thing: when you have the synergy of unity, you can create way more. So you're really
Yes.
shooting yourself in the foot. And in certain religions, um, respecting your wife, it's seen as a secret for financial success. Can you imagine that?
Ugh,
It's seen as the secret for financial success.
ugh.
So it's a paradox here that people think, not a paradox, but
Misperception, right? Yeah.
misperception,
Yeah.
that people think that bringing my partner in takes me away from this. No, 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 no. Everything is energy, right? When you do the right thing, it has a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Your relationship has a huge ripple effect. I had to. cancel two speaking engagements that I had when my husband was in the hospital. One was traveling 7 hours to go speak at a tech conference,
Ah,
but there was no regret because I know that I wouldn't want it to be other way.
yeah,
There's no way I'm going to leave him. And I know that I didn't miss anything because when I do the thing that aligns with my values, that is the person that I want to become,
yeah,
then it always works well. The idea, I think, is to understand that when we are in pain, we are worried, we're scared, we are stressed. Our tendency, and it's completely normal, right? It's to default to our coping mechanisms and look for instant gratification.
yes,
But if rather than seeking that, acting from instant gratification, which is let's just leave me alone, I don't have time to talk to you, we think about, okay, what kind of person do I want to be remembered for? What kind of wife do I want to be remembered for? Husband do I want to? Then we act from where we always want to be and be remembered, hence created a life of no regrets. Then we realize that the right thing to do is probably very different than what I feel like doing right now. And that's what I say, that commitment is not fueled by feelings. I know you feel like doing A, but think about the person you want to become. Think about when you look a few years back and act from that intention, not from where you are, but from where you want to be. It's really about I seeing a whole cake and feeling like eating the entire cake because it's delicious, but you go, yeah, but I don't want to be that person that has zero self-control.
yeah,
Well, that's easy to understand, but when it comes to relationships, it's crucial we view the marriage as its own entity. I am committed to that entity. And it's, if this, for entrepreneurs, this is easy. Your business is not you. It's its own entity.
yep,
And you show up even on days you don't feel like it. You inspire your team even on days that you don't feel like it because you're committed to it. You're committed to that entity. Marriage is the same. You're committed not even to your wife, or to your husband. You're committed to the entity of your marriage.
I think the way you frame that and how you started when we first started talking about when you have a baby, not getting up is not an option. It is a commitment you made when you had it. And if you reframed your marriage and said this is what you signed up for, how to paraphrase that back to you is that is also a commitment and it should come before anything else and it should be the
Right?
first thing. When you do that, now you have a foundation from which to grow as a person, and good, bad, or indifferent that happens in your career path, you've got a somebody at home that's there to love you and support you through whatever it is, right? Whether it's a layoff, a job transition, a challenging coworker, leadership situation, whatever it is, they're kind of your ride or die. They've got your back, right? And they're the person that will always be there to listen, be there to offer advice when you ask for it, but they won't necessarily, interject unless it's appropriate to do so. And they're there to be your biggest supporter, which, as I always tell people, like one of the reasons that you need a coach, right, is having somebody in your corner that will look at you without judgment, who will be there to be a guide. They won't give you all the answers to the test, but they're there to support you 100% because they have a commitment to seeing you through whatever it is that you might need to tackle. Imagine having that person at home 24/7, always there to support and guide you, and to be that person, your biggest cheerleader, your person that my wife does an exceptionally great job of this. She will tell me when I'm not being very Ripley, right? I'm not being consistent with my brand, or I'm not being consistent with who I am, or I just need to knock it off because I'm being too aggressive or just too big of a jerk. And she is that litmus test to remind me that yes, she is the person that I chose to help me become a better person. And when I'm willing to let that in, it seems like everything seems to fall in line, no matter how bad things might be going back at the office or whatever challenge I might be facing. Everything else sort of takes a back seat, which means when I do come to the office or I do have to tackle that project or I've got that issue that I need to work through, it seems less intimidating and less challenging because I feel like I went home, like I love gaming,
You're not
right?
fragmented.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
whole.
exactly. Well, I was just gonna say when I go home and that's where my power up is, and I come back fully, charged and ready to roll, and I will live to fight another day and get through the issue and the problem. But because I know I've always got that safe place to go and be able to have that person in my corner, I think is really, really powerful.
Very.
How is it that you got interested in this entire direction for work? I want to hear a little bit of that origin story. What turned you on to this, and what is it that excites you about what you get to do every day?
So I'm a former engineer, um, and 15 years ago, I needed to realign my career. That's the me pillar, the personal responsibility for my happiness.
Yeah.
It's written in the book. Your partner is not your punching bag, and you cannot outsource your happiness to them. Okay, so I went through that need for realignment and finding why am I unhappy, because even though I had everything else, the family, the husband, and I needed to realign my career. So it goes back to the two aspects of your life that you can course correct. And yeah, and after going through my own searching, I decided that I wanted to certify and work as a coach. Looking back, it's always been there. Obviously, I remember when I chose to study engineering, I was debating between engineering and psychology. And even as an engineer, I did a lot of work training other people, mentoring. So it's always been there. And yeah, my husband actually, this is an interesting point. My husband didn't believe in that. We're both engineers. He's a software engineer. I was a chemical engineer. He
Oh,
didn't believe
okay.
in coaching. So we were very left brain people. And he said, look, I don't think you can make money with that. That's maybe a hobby. I don't see how you make a career of this, but I don't need to believe in it. You need to believe in it. I'm supporting you. So
Love
that
it.
was huge because he not only said, I'm supporting you, we actually practice what it's taught in the third pillar, the hour. We we made a plan because we knew we would have to compromise our lifestyle for a while, going down in order to go up. And we made a list of the things we are willing to let go, like going to restaurants, vacations, and the things that were non-negotiable, that we are not going to compromise, like our children's private schools and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we made that plan. We look at the budget and we realized that I have 2 years of grace to build the coaching because, unlike some coaches say, you don't build a six-figure business overnight.
No.
It's not one AI template that will get you a list of clients. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was important because first of all, I didn't need him to believe in it, but I needed him to support me. And we needed to coordinate because what I see is that hadn't we done that, he could easily come to me after 6 months or a year and say, where's the money? Why
Yeah.
aren't you making any money? Right? So because it was we prepare ourselves, we plan, he knew. So we avoided all that, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's the coordination aspect. I talk about the three C's in the third pillar: communication, coordination, collaboration. Right. So he collaborated because we coordinated. And then I obviously I took the time to build a practice one brick at a time, and that's how I started. So in the beginning, I was mostly coaching for career. Then I started also in parallel coaching couples. And basically, I did a detour. I started a coaching school, which still goes on. It's called the Coaching Academy. So there are two pillars to my business. There's my private practice, and there's the Coaching Academy where I certify other coaches.
Ah.
That was because my private practice, after 5 years, exploded. I had two locations. I would have 40 clients a week. I couldn't keep up. So I hired other coaches to work with me. I had to teach them my way of coaching. People wanted to learn, and that's how my academy was born.
That's awesome.
So that's basically how, in the beginning, the desire was not to teach coaching, obviously, and our coaches become members of International Coaches Federation. They build their own practices. So I'm very passionate about that. But I'm most passionate about helping people have both a fulfilling career and a thriving relationship, and undo the myth that you have to wait for retirement to invest in your relationship. No, you don't. And if you do that, might be too late.
Yeah.
You might end up without your job and without a partner. Or you have to wait until the children leave. Obviously, no. And in the book, there's a quote that do not put your relationship on the back seat because of your children, because then when they leave, you end up empty nested and empty relationship aspects. So this is what I'm most passionate about. You cross the 50, you start thinking about what is the impact that I want to live in this world, what passionates me the most. For me, the work of love, the labor of love is helping people build both and not compromise. Like, really believe, truly, truly believe that it's possible for them to build the most delicious relationship. If I could have an IV where I transfer to people this consciousness, this belief, this knowingness that I have, that I know it's possible. Like, not only that I live it, I've seen it in my clients. That's what I would create. I would create a product that it's an IV liquid that you plug in, and you get that belief that if you invest with the right guidance, no matter where your relationship is, if you are committed, that's all it's required from you, the desire, the commitment, you can build that most delicious relationship that you say, someone can pinch me to know this is true.
Yeah.
Am I living a dream or is this true? Like, really, that. I hope I was clear enough. It's hard to find the words for what I feel, right?
Yeah. No, you were very, very clear. The thing I really resonated with at the onset of what you shared was the fact that you knew where you wanted to go, what you wanted to do. And rather than I'm doing it regardless of whether you support me or not, you involved your partner, even if they didn't necessarily understand or exactly get the vision. Like a good entrepreneur, you saw something that needed to be done, and almost nobody sees what you see, which is what makes
Yeah,
entrepreneurs entrepreneurs, right? And rather than take offense to it, you allowed that conversation to evolve, and you brought your husband into the process of the conversation of what this would look like and how much runway we have. And even though they may not be necessarily directly get the business or even an active participant in it, they have to know how it impacts them because it does, right? And having that conversation was, I think, a really brilliant move. I know for my wife and I, whenever I've started something or done, an entrepreneurial venture, I try to, and not always well, try to explain what I'm doing and what I see. And then I naturally get defensive because I'm like every other entrepreneur. It's like, how can you not see what I'm doing? And I can see how age and wisdom has improved over the years, where now when I actually share something with her, I share it in a way that allows her to see the end game and where it could be and what it could do and why it would make a positive impact to our lives and potentially how it gets us closer to our own individual goals, rather than here's this great lofty idea. I don't know how I'm going to get customers, don't know how I'm going to get the product or service out the door, don't know anything, but by God, we need to put all our money towards this, right? Completely different approach. Well, you can imagine how one goes versus the other, right? And I liked how you went through that process, and then look what you did. I loved how you said, you built a practice brick by brick. You were to a point where it started to explode. So proof of concept way beyond that, success, barometers off the charts. And then you said, hey, okay, I get to this point. Now, how do I expand and continue to grow this in a way that's consistent with what I want to deliver out to the world and to the client experience, and do it in a way where I can actually essentially scale myself and my skill sets in a way that I don't necessarily have to do 80 clients a month, I've got a team of folks that can do that, or they can pay for my system and my approach, and then they can go build their own business. And the ripples that you've created just through the work and the model and now your book is just super inspiring, because it is what I think, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's what most coaches don't go into coaching to think about. They don't think about the repeatable, proven process, the approach, the model that needs to be built, and then how to pull other people into it. I can't tell you how many divorced coaches I know that loved what they were doing, but their partner didn't understand or get it. And then when the money wasn't coming in, that caused conflict. And then they had relationships that ended because of it. So your approach is brilliant and just so refreshing, because it has so many lessons just interwoven there for our audience to learn from. So, I mean, I knew I was going to love this conversation, but I didn't know I was going to love it this much. So, thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
so much with
And
me.
I want to tell you that sometimes our partners will kind of push us to the wall a little bit. And that's the best thing we need at the moment. Because I recall after 2 years, he said, well, my middle one was going to private school at that point, starting elementary. He says, if by next year you are not making X amount of money per month, we will have to reevaluate this choice.
Hmm.
And I'm so grateful he said that, because my answer to him was, there's no question that by then I will do it. And I had no clue how. But that's the entrepreneur, right? The
Yeah,
vision is in your mind. And and I needed to hear those words, not to be resentful of him, but to kind of get a reality check and see, okay, I need to make this happen. So I didn't know the how. I knew what I want, but the how always presents when you're clear about the what. I always say that clarity is a very strong force. So you see how the power couple, right? We help each other. We help each other get unstuck. We show each other what we don't want to see. It's if you are open for the dialogue, it will always take you to the next step.
it will. I love it. There is so much that we could explore, and we're going to have to do a follow up episode. There is absolutely no doubt. I've got to go through your book, and I'm sure I'm going to have a bajillion more questions for you. But I want to be respectful of your time. And we always get to this point of the podcast where I ask a couple of Ripple connection questions. They're fun to ask, fun to answer. Are you okay with that?
Yes, go ahead.
So, what's the best thing about being a first time author now?
Is to say I'm an author.
It's a good answer.
Because I'll tell you, when I started as a coach, people were saying you need to write a book to succeed as a coach, and I was like, I'm not an author. No, I don't do that. But I think the sweetest part of being an author is was for me to give the book to my mom, because this book is also a tribute to my parents and my grandparents. My parents were a great role model, I have to say, and my grandparents were also fantastic role models when it comes
That's
to
great.
strong relationships. So for me, I had to translate it to Spanish. I wrote it in English, but for my mom, and translated it to Spanish. To give her the book was the sweetest. The thing every time I was writing the book, I was imagining that moment where I give her the book and I will get tears. So that was the best part of being a published author, really.
That's cool. You and I share a very similar story there. I'll have to share with another time, but yeah, I love that, and I'm sure they are so very, very proud of you. What did the 7-year-old version of Gabriella want to be when she grew up?
Oh, that's easy. A biochemist.
No kidding. At
I
7.
became, yeah, I became a chemical engineer. Yeah, I had a love for chemistry, even though I didn't know what it was from a very early age.
That's awesome.
Oh, wait, my mom said, I said I want to be a mom.
Okay. I love that.
That too. Yeah.
Yep. Tick both boxes technically, and then made the shift. So, okay. So I'm going to ask you this question just slightly different. So, if you weren't coaching today and you weren't speaking and training on your book, or you weren't defaulting back to your engineering background, what would Gabriella want to do if she wasn't doing any of that? What else we find you doing?
I I would just mentor entrepreneurs. Like when they need a sounding board,
Yep.
need somebody from the outside that will give them a different perspective. I do that, but I would do that full time and pro bono.
I love that. I love that. What is your secret power or your genius?
My genius zone. It's the way I present concepts. I'm trained to look at soul gifts. Mine is divine wisdom. It's the way I translate knowledge into very concrete concepts through analogies that people can grasp.
That's good. I like that. And so necessary in every aspect, but especially in coaching
I
for
like
sure.
simplicity and,
Yep.
and pragmatism. So I like taking concepts into very simple words that people can understand. Usually I use analogies.
I love that. It's a perfect way for it to be memorable for clients and for your audience, for sure. Um, if there was an opportunity for you to put a message on a billboard that everybody saw on the way to work or school and home again, what would that message be?
Don't compromise on less than happiness, especially in relationship and career. Don't compromise. Don't settle. Don't settle. Please don't settle for mediocre. Always strive for extraordinary, but I'm not talking about a scale of success, whatever that means for you.
I love that. I love that a lot. What is the question that you wish I had asked you, but I didn't?
How did I meet my husband?
Okay. Tell me, how'd you meet your husband?
Now, so that's because you didn't read the book yet. But so I was engaged with someone else to be married. I can see your face, Jen. What? And a month before the wedding, I canceled the wedding because I had a dream that in my dream, as I was walking towards the altar, the person that was waiting for me was my husband, not my fiance.
Wow.
The next day, I canceled the wedding and pretty much quickly started dating my husband, which I knew only 6 months.
Wow. That's a cool story. And you guys have been together how long?
We've been together 30 and married 27.
See, we're very similar. That's awesome. I love that. Ah, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind? You mentioned your kids. What do you want them to think of mom 20, 30 years from now?
I think our marriage is our legacy to our children,
Yeah.
really. I think that's part of the reason why I also wrote this book. And I have two boys and a daughter. For my daughter to realize that you can embody feminine and masculine energy, that you can be very successful at work, whether you're an engineer that was a very more male. She's in law school, so she probably won't be an engineer, but you can also embody feminine energy and be a mother and a wife and
Yep.
enjoy both. You don't have to compromise. And for my boys, the same. You can have a partner, you can support them and rise together.
I love that. That's a great, great legacy for sure. And no doubt you're going to achieve that without question. Last two
Thank
questions. What does the ripple effect mean to you when you hear those words? What does it conjure up in your mind?
For me, a healthy marriage is a huge ripple effect.
Yep.
It's a ripple effect on our children and what they will do in their relationships and to our society a whole.
I
Yeah.
love that. And last question, what positive ripple can I create for you?
Oh, well, this is amazing possible ripple effect, right? You're sharing this with your community. Yeah. And once you read the book, if you want to share more about and give it to people who can benefit from it, that's be very grateful for that.
I absolutely will. I don't know what it is, but you and I are going to find something to do together other than just this podcast because you and I speak a very similar language and we have a passion for helping people realize all the potential that can be had in their life personally and professionally when you have the right people and especially the right partner with you. I can't wait to continue the conversation. Sadly, you're stuck with me as a friend, so that's just the takeaway here, right? So we're going to find some ways to work
I would
together.
love that. That would
But
be lovely.
I am so grateful. So the way that people can learn about the book and get their copy is for your website. Do you want to share what that is for everybody?
Yes. They can visit my website, Gabriela with one L, Embon, EMBON.com. And there's a tab for the book. It has all the international Amazon links. but they can also find it on Amazon directly. Becoming a Power Couple, or just put my name on Amazon. So, Becoming a Power Couple: Four Pillars to Engineer Legendary Marriages.
I love it. And for those that are out there watching and listening, if you hear anything, that Gabriela has shared with you today that piques your interest, I highly recommend you go to her website. She has some great resources. She also has some invitations on how to get engaged and involved in working with her. And I can tell you, just by spending the time with her, you would be in really good company to have her as your coach. So I highly encourage you to check out her website. Are there any other social media links that you'd like to share? Or
Well, I'm on LinkedIn.
okay,
I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Not very savvy on these two, but LinkedIn is always the best way.
okay. And then just type your name in and they'll be able to find you. So that'd be great. So if
Yes.
you do reach out to her, be sure to let her know that you learned about her work through the Ripple Effect podcast. But guys, we will be back again with another episode of the Ripple Effect podcast. But in the meantime, Gabriela, thank you so much for your time. And as always, ripple on.
Steve, thank you for being such a great company. Such great company.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I enjoyed this so much.